Everybody, it's Daniel. Welcome back to my sofa in beautiful Barcelona, Spain. The other day, I made a podcast episode in which I mentioned that I am now Spanish officially. This is still a bit of a work in progress. I'm waiting on some final documents, but I have gotten to the point where I had to fill out the paper where I select my official Spanish name. I thought that would make a good video because Spanish naming conventions are a bit different than what we're used to in the US. As usual, I have no idea what they're doing in Latin America. It could be something pretty similar or not. But let me tell you about Spanish naming conventions today. The most important of the Spanish naming conventions is the two last names. This is specifically what I had to do. I had to fill out a paper and select a second last name for myself. I just put a copy of my birth certificate in the documentation, and so in theory, they will take my mother's maiden name as my second last name. This is what we do generally in Spain, that your first last name is your father's last name, your second last name is your mother's last name. So the Spanish for this is apellido. Apellido is last name. El primer apellido is your first last name. Your first surname makes it a little bit more easy to understand rather than saying the first last name. Your first surname is your primer apellido. Your segundo apellido is your second surname, which comes from your mother usually. So you're going to see this on any document you fill out in Spain, by the way. Primer apellido, segundo apellido. Useful sentence for a lot of you is going to be no tengo segundo apellido. These days, this is becoming less of a problem, I think, but a long time ago, I used to have all sorts of problems because computer systems would not be set up to deal with a person with only one last name. So I would go to the bank to try to open a bank account, and an hour and a half later, they've got the manager out there and he's trying to figure out how to open a bank account for a person, with only one last name. So no tengo segundo apellido is the statement that you do not have a second surname. Other than that, you have your primer apellido, your segundo apellido. After that, we have nombre. Nombre is just your name, your first name, generally. You could say nombre completo, probably is what you would say if you want, somebody's full name. Nombre completo. If you just say nombre, it would be the first name. So on a document, you're going to have a space for nombre, a space for primer apellido, a space for segundo apellido. That's generally just every single document you will ever see in Spain. In Spanish, also, they don't really accept the concept of a middle name. Like in the US, you probably have a middle name and you probably never use it. It's just kind of an extra thing on your birth certificate or whatever. A lot of people don't even tell their best friend what their middle name is because nobody cares. Or if you're a kid, maybe you're sitting around being embarrassed by your middle name or whatever. Here in Spain, they don't really have the concept of a middle name. They do have a lot of nombres compuestos. Nombres compuestos are two-part names, compound names, I guess you could say. So a nombre compuesto is something like Jose Antonio. Jose Antonio is a common one from, older guys. Now it's not quite as common, I believe, but there's still a lot of nombres compuestos. You could be Mari Carmen. A lot of women's names have a Maria at the beginning and then something else. So they might just go by the second part. They might go by Maria, or they might go by some sort of nombre compuesto. Maria de los Ángeles. You could be Maria of the Angels, Maria de los Ángeles. And you could shorten that to be Marian or Maria Ángeles or any number of things. You could be Maria Jose. Maria Jose is a woman's name. Jose Maria is a man's name. It's the two names of Jesus's father and mother. Just depending on the order. So Maria Jose or Jose Maria. You could be Juan Carlos, the previous king El Rey Emerito. He's the king who stepped down and moved to Abu Dhabi, but he is the Rey Emerito Juan Carlos I. The current king is Felipe. But yeah, Juan Carlos is just a normal sort of nombre compuesto. You know, you could be Maria Fernanda, which you might abbreviate to Mafe, whatever you want. There's like nombres compuestos of all kinds, and often people will, you know, abbreviate those as well. So my actual middle name is John, and what happens to me is that if I'm doing sort of bureaucratic things, like, I don't know, I go to the doctor or something at the health center, they've got my ID document with my full name on it. And when they have to call out some name, they will say Daniel John, as if this were a nombre compuesto, and they're, you know, they're using both of my names as if it were sort of one longer name, because that's the way they do it in Spain. Another important cultural note here is that women do not take their husbands' names when they get married. They have their two last names from birth, and they just keep those two last names. So I've heard people saying that they're married in the US and they move to Spain with their husbands, and people think it's weird that, you know, you're married to somebody with your same last name, because that's just not how it works in Spain. You're married to somebody, ideally, with a completely different last name or set of last names. So Spanish first names can be pretty repetitive, or Spanish given names can be pretty repetitive, but the fact of having two last names often makes it like you have a unique name in the end anyway. I'm looking at the list of the most common baby names in 2024. For girls, the most common baby names, the most common total is Maria Carmen. The second is Maria, and the third is Carmen. So just to give you an idea, there's a lot of repetition. After that, you've got Ana Maria, you've got Laura, you've got Maria Pilar. Pilar refers to the Virgen del Pilar. Up in Zaragoza, there's just a famous Virgin of the Pillar. And, you know, you can have Pilar in your name. It's a completely normal Spanish name. After that, you've got Maria Dolores. I think in English that might be like Our Lady of Sorrow or something like that. Maria Dolores. Dolor is pain. I have a video about me duele la cabeza, etc. But Maria Dolores is just a normal name. You could be called Maria Dolores, and you know, nobody necessarily associates your name with pain all the time. Or you could just probably shorten that to Lola or something like that. After that, you have Isabel, you have Ana, and you have Maria Teresa. Maria Teresa is often Maite. So there's a lot of Maria even now in the list of typical Spanish names. In boys' names, you have Antonio, Manuel, Jose, Francisco. Francisco is often Paco. David, Javier. Javier with a J. A lot of Javier become Chavi or something similar to that. Javi or Chavi, depending on, you know, how you want to shorten it. You could be Daniel, also in Spanish. It's the sixth most popular name, it looks like, or seventh. You could be Juan. You could be Jose Antonio, or you could be Francisco Javier. Both common names still. So like I said, a lot of nombres compuestos. There's some law about not being able to name your kid something that's like insulting or going to cause them problems later in life. So in theory, there's some, you know, generation of 8-year-olds that are named Khaleesi or something after a character in Game of Thrones, but you can't name your kid something, you know, really dumb. An example I saw is that in the Basque country, sometimes people would move to the Basque country and like they would hear the word Alua and they would want to name their daughters Alua, but, you know, not knowing presumably that Alua is the Basque word for vagina. And so, you know, the bureaucrats up there would like stop parents from naming their kids Alua for that reason. Speaking of which, there are several other Basque names that have become popular. Iker was a common name for a while because of Iker Casillas, who was, you know, the most famous Spanish football player. He was the goalie for Real Madrid and for the national team for several years during the glory days of the Spanish national team. So a lot of people named their kids Iker for a while there. There's also Aitor. There's Asier, which I go to the gym with a guy named Asier. I didn't realize it was a Basque name. And there's also Ibai and Unai, which are two Basque names that I've heard, small children called these things. I just found out that Unai is cowherd. There you go. So there's nothing stopping somebody in Malaga from naming their kid some Basque name if they want to. Here in Catalonia, we have also some typical Catalan names that are either, regular Spanish names, but in a Catalan version, or, I guess, typical Catalan names. Oriol is a typical Catalan name. I think they pronounce it more like Uriol. There's a guy at my gym also called Uri, which I believe is short for Uriol. You also have Joan. Joan is Juan, but it's the Catalan version. You have Jordi, which is Jorge. The patron saint of Barcelona is Sant Jordi, who is Saint George or San Jorge, depending on what language you're speaking. A lot of these names, by the way, have equivalents in other European languages. So if you meet a Greek guy whose name is Yorgos, or you meet an Italian whose name is Giorgio, we're talking all about the same name. This has little to do with Spanish naming conventions. But if you live in a place where there's people from a lot of different countries, you're going to come across all kinds of names like this. You could be Pau, which is, Paul or Pablo. You could be Esteba, which is Steve. You could be Enric, which is Enrique or Henry. There's lots of options. Kim. I've already used the word vagina at least once in this video, so let's do this thing. In for a penny, in for a pound, as they say. Kim is a Catalan name. It might be short for Joaquin, or a version of Joaquin or something. In English, of course, the word quim is vulgar slang for vagina or vulva. But I used to go to a chiropractor, and the chiropractor's office was right next to a papeleria, like a stationery store that was called Kim, and I would always kind of look at the sign and giggle, quim. Okay, well, I started this video because I thought, what is the easiest possible video I could make today? And here we are. It kind of got out of hand, and we're talking about, Catalan and Basque names that sound like female body parts. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Final note for today, the expression in for a penny, in for a pound is not super common in English, at least in American English, but it does have a Spanish version, which is de perdidos al rio. I believe somebody published a book where they kind of literally translated typical Spanish expressions. And I think the book might have been called From Lost to the River. So Spanish people will often actually just say from lost to the river because it's a humorous, nonsensical translation of a Spanish phrase into English. Anyway, that's all I got for today. If you would like to donate to the channel, please go by expatmadrid.com/donate. Send some money my way. I will use it to buy coffee and sparkling water and to, pay my gym membership and generally just, live my normal life over here in Barcelona. It also helps me to, spend more time making these videos rather than doing something else because, I have a regular business that I also have to earn a living from. About Spanish culture, I have a podcast here on YouTube and elsewhere called Spain to Go. You can look on Spotify or Apple Podcasts as well. It's in a lot of places technically. Spain to Go has about 120 episodes and talking about all aspects of Spanish culture. Most of those episodes come from posts on the blog, so head by expatmadrid.com to read the articles if you prefer reading rather than listening to me. Other than that, I hope you have a great day wherever you are in the world. Hasta la próxima. Bye.